All right, guys. Our next guest is not only one of the best analysts in MMA, but also one of the busiest men in MMA with a whole array of excellent podcasts he regularly puts out, including The War Room, where he breaks down previews and dissects fights. There's Listen, which he co-hosts with Mark Goddard, who we're also fans of. There's also Full Reptile Radio, also on his YouTube channel. He also does fantastic work for BT Sport. Oh, and let's not forget, he's also a regular UFC commentator and former UFC title challenger. There is only one Dan Hardy, and he's kind enough to join us today. Dan, how are you? And how is it even possible that you fit all of this into your life? Oh, and Inside the Octagon. Almost forgot that one.
I'm good. That's quite the intro. Feel like I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame or something.
Yeah.
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, I got off a plane yesterday from New Zealand. I spent 30 hours on the journey over researching Adesanya, Romero, and Woodley against Edwards.
Nice.
Because they are the Inside the Octagons that we record tomorrow. So I got off the plane and went straight to the studio to start preparing. The thing that fuels me is my love for martial arts. I'm completely addicted to this sport, and it's a privilege to be doing the job that I'm doing.
Well, we love it, man, and we definitely benefit from you doing such a great job. We've got you to help us preview UFC 248, specifically the Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero fight that's going to be coming up in the main event. I mean, I don't know if you heard it from the show, but his coach, Eugene Behrman, was on the program, Israel's coach, and they said that they want to Alex Volkanovski Romero and get a different type of victory, one when there's no doubt about who won. What do you think that means? And what do you think is a different type of victory over a guy like Yoel Romero?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. And the main question is, why would he decide to defend his belt against one of the most dangerous middleweights on a losing streak? Which I think is the most fascinating question. And it's because he knows how dangerous Yoel Romero is, and so does everybody else. And there's not a single person that's fought Yoel Romero and made it look easy. Nobody has. The people that have beat him have not made it look easy. I mean, I watched the Paulo Costa fight yesterday, and I mean, Costa edged it. It was closer than I thought it was, though. I mean, I could even see it scored for Romero in some ways. But Costa's face was mangled after that fight. And everybody that fights Romero gets wrecked in some way. Even like Rocco damaged his leg kicking him. It's he's got this air about him that's quite terrifying. And I think what Israel Adesanya wants to do is to beat him better than anybody else, cleaner than anybody else. I know he was annoyed that he got caught when he was trading with Rob Whittaker when he got the finish. I think he knows if Yoel Romero catches him, there's a good job that he wakes up with his back on the canvas. And I think he likes that challenge. I think he sees that everybody else respects that challenge in front of him. And I think what he means by beating him, like Volkanovski, is leaving no doubt is by outpointing him comfortably and not getting touched, showing us his true grasp of what martial arts capability he has.
Let me ask you, what do you think would be more impressive if Israel Adesanya was to go in there and knock out Romero, a guy who a lot of people think, in some ways can't be knocked out, or if he was to stay in there with him over the course of 5 rounds, knowing how dangerous Romero is, and, like you said, just outpoint him and not really get touched?
Honestly, I would be impressed either way. I think the challenge is to get to the end of the 25 minutes or however long the fight is without getting really damaged. Israel's at the beginning of his career as a champion. The last thing he wants is to be derailed for 12 months. And that's potentially what Yoel Romero represents to anybody that's fighting him. So the biggest thing for Israel is it doesn't matter how he wins. As long as he does it and he's able to step out of the octagon healthily of his own accord, that's the victory. I think knocking him out would be very impressive, but I also think cooking him over the 25 minutes would be very impressive as well. But when I say cooking him, I mean beating him up without getting beaten up yourself. And that's really the challenge here.
I want to ask you, Dan, what do you think is sort of the toughest thing for Israel to overcome in this one? Is it sort of keeping the distance from Romero, making sure he doesn't get into that danger zone? Is it Romero's devastating KO power, his hand speed, his forward pressure, the fact that he's, dangerous all the way through the fight and isn't really predictable in what he might do?
That's exactly it. It's the unpredictability and the fact that he's quite happy to just kind of hang back and let you work. Going back to the Costa fight, I feel like if that was over 25 minutes, Romero would have done a lot of damage to him, if not stopped him in the 4th or 5th. Romero's got 6 stoppages now in the 3rd round, but there's this perception that he's a very fast fighter. He's not. He moves quickly. He's very, very quick. He's very, very agile, especially for someone that's nearly 43. The thing with Yoel Romero that makes him dangerous is that And I think we did see this with Costa a little bit. You know, if you feel like you win, and if you feel like you're beating him up, you put yourself at more of a risk, start throwing more shots, and then he clubs you with one shot and takes you off your feet. That's where Adesanya's got to play this very, very smart and always respect Yoel Romero's danger, because that 0 to 60 that Yoel Romero's got is enough to blast anybody out of the octagon. And Adesanya's not. I mean, he's got knockout power, of course, but it's much more down to efficiency of technique. And something that I stole off Teddy Atlas, the great boxing analyst and coach, putting water in the basement. You know, like it's like Money in the Bank, water in the basement. It's slowing him down. It's beating him up over time. And to go in there and beat Yoel Romero with one big shot, I don't think there's anybody in the division that can do that, to be honest. I mean, his neck doesn't move a great deal. I think you'll notice the scar on the back of his neck. I actually think his vertebrae fused together from a previous injury. It's going to make him even more difficult to knock out. So I think the smart thing for Adesanya to do is to mix his targets up and to slowly beat him up and make him more vulnerable. You know, when someone gets tired, when someone's breathing with their mouth open, they're easier to knock out. You know, you can do those things by jabbing them to the body. You can jab them to the body when you slow them down by beating up their legs. So that slow cooking, which is what Max Holloway used to do very well in his fights, and actually had that done to him by Volkanovski. I expect them to try and do the same thing there.
Eugene Behrman was on the program, head coach over at City Kickboxing. He mentioned that a leopard doesn't change its spots, and they expect Yoel Romero to be unpredictable, like you mentioned, and sort of dangerous and sort of out there doing crazy things. But I'm just wondering, if you're looking at it from Yoel's perspective and also American top team's perspective, you know, standing on the outside and copying shots against a guy like Israel Adesanya just seems like a very, very bad idea. Do you anticipate then possibly Yoel Romero might surprise us all and come out with a completely different game plan, be a lot more active and a lot more or less willing to stay back, take shots, and be the unpredictable Romero that we've seen in his last few fights?
I mean, there is definitely a possibility. I just think it's a very, very slim one. I think that Romero, I think first of all, Romero realizes that over 25 minutes, it doesn't matter how good an athlete he is. He has the physique that will slow down. Because, you know, every time he commits to something, he's you know, really, really putting everything into it. I mean, he does do the playing thing, the touch and the tap thing, but that's no danger at all. When Adesanya's doing the touch and tap striking, he's still snapping with it. It's still damaging. Whereas Romero's only impactful when he's got his foot fully on the gas. And that is a massive taxation on his cardio, which I think he knows will not hold up over 25 minutes against anybody. Just because, I mean, physiologically, it's you know, it's kind of superhuman anyway, what he's able to do. And I think that would be an even bigger ask of someone with that kind of physique. So I think the idea of him coming out starting fast would only leave him more vulnerable in the later rounds. I think he's more likely to take the first 2 rounds off and then fight hard for the last 3 and try and be really impactful. I expect in the first couple of rounds he's going to try and catch Adesanya with counters. Hope to catch him slipping, catch him stepping too far in, getting a little overzealous, and catch him a little bit like Gastelum did. I think, you know, Romero sees that opportunity to club him with one big shot in the first couple of rounds, and I think he'll be happy to hang back and do it. It's Adesanya that's got to start, you know, steadily, but keep himself safe and just slowly build his pressure up over time. Because Romero, the longer the fight goes and the slower he starts in the beginning, the more dangerous he is later in the fight.
You know, it's an interesting thing. One of the reasons why people think this is such a dangerous matchup for Adesanya is because of Romero's wrestling. Obviously, he's super dangerous on the feet, but people say, hey, he's dangerous on the feet and he's got that world-class wrestling. But one of the things we saw between the Robert Whittaker fights is in the second one, Romero just really didn't use the wrestling a whole lot. And a lot of people believe it's because of the cardio. He tries to sort of save himself. Do you think we're going to see a lot of wrestling in this fight? Maybe Romero looking to put Adesanya on his back? Or do you think it's going to be similar to the second Whittaker fight where he tries to conserve himself?
No, I think you're right. I don't think he's going to really use his wrestling a great deal unless he really needs to, unless he feels like he's really under pressure. Or I mean, from the Costa fight, you know, he was. I think he got 2 takedowns right at the end of the round, like the last 5 or 10 seconds. Yeah. That to me tells me that in his mindset he's working on the old idea that stealing around with a takedown works, and I don't think it does anymore. I think the judges are a bit wiser to that now. So I think if we do see Romero shoot a takedown, it will be towards the end of a round, and it will be kind of fruitless. I think he realizes that by employing wrestling earlier in the round, he's only going to leave him fatigued, towards the later part of the round, because even if he takes Adesanya down and controls him on the ground for the first round, every time he takes him down, Adesanya is going to be fighting to get back up. He's going to be trying to defend those takedowns. It's going to get more and more effort, and Adesanya is not going to accept being on his back. He's not just going to stay there. He's going to constantly be fighting to get off his back, which is going to be fatiguing for Yoel Romero. The only other way I see him using his wrestling is kind of like he did against Machida. But same thing, he spent 2 rounds kickboxing with a guy that he didn't need to kickbox with, and then just decided he wanted to change pace, took him down and smashed him with elbows. I think if he does take him down, he's got to work fast. But I think he gives Adesanya the respect and the understanding that he's tough enough to not be put away that easy.
It's a fascinating matchup. I think the cage is going to come into play for this one as well. I'm just wondering, Dan, do you think Yoel Romero will be able to utilize the cage to potentially get Israel up against there and use his dirty boxing, use his clinching to sort of work some short shots and elbows and uppercuts? And do you anticipate we'll see Israel circling a lot rather than moving backwards in sort of anticipation of those kinds of techniques?
I think ultimately it will be Israel pushing from the center and forcing Romero back up against the fence. The thing that we've seen in Yoel Romero recently, especially between the 2 Rob Whittaker fights, in the first Whittaker fight, he was moving, he was quite mobile, he was on his toes, he kept hopping in with that oblique kick to the knee. He started at a fairly steady pace, and I feel like in that fight he learned a lesson, and he felt like he slowed down over the 25 minutes. What we saw in the next fight against Rob Whittaker was a much more stationary Yoel Romero. He was standing in range, he was walking into range, he was even doing this weird kind of Wing Chun Kung Fu guard. It was very unusual, but against Whittaker, we saw that he's a little predictable when he fought Adesanya in his fight, because he was rushing forward with the same kind of shots over and over again. When Yoel Romero was backed up against the fence with Costa and he was under fire, he's doing the same thing. He's blocking the shots. He's slipping out the way of stuff. He's got great reactions. I mean, I talk about it inside the octagon. He slips an elbow, which is crazy because it's not something he would have ever really drilled, I would imagine, in a fight. So he's very recognizing things. The difference with I would say, Paulo Costa for sure, Rob Whittaker to a lesser extent, but definitely the opposite end of the spectrum is Adesanya, is the way that they throw shots. Paulo Costa might as well send you a postcard when he's throwing a punch, because you can see him winding up from the other side of the octagon. So Yoel Romero can bank that when he pulls that right arm back, that right hook's coming, so he can prepare for it. If you watch, especially Adesanya against Rob Wilkinson in his debut, where he just dominated him, you can see how he mixes up his targets. He feints the kick to throw the jab. He feints the jab to throw the knee. He's so good at disguising his intentions when he's in there. And I think that's the problem for Yoel Romero if he does decide to use that tight guard and walk his way in. I'm not saying that Adesanya won't hurt himself hitting Yoel Romero, because that seems to be quite a common tactic for Romero to basically use his steely build as a weapon. But I do think that Adesanya will be able to pick him apart a little easier, because he's more efficient and more experienced in his striking than other people that Romero has fought before.
It's interesting because we always see Adesanya improving with every fight, and he learns from his mistakes. It seems like he's plugged up those holes from the Gastelum fight. I'm wondering what you sort of see as, I guess, his sort of biggest weapon in this one, and also City Kickboxing's love of feints and feinting. I'm wondering how big of a factor that could be in this fight if Adesanya can sort of employ that, more or better than previous opponents, and if that could help him sort of produce that desired result of, Volkanovskiing Romero and leaving no doubt as to who won.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think he started it in his UFC debut using those nice feints, and he's just gotten better at it over time. He was using good feints against Rob Whittaker as well, feinting the low kick, coming with the left hook. I think that'll be a big part of his game. But I think the main weapon that he brings into the octagon is patience. And I think we saw that in the first round against Rob Whittaker, when Whittaker was charging forward and Adesanya was quite happy to give him the space. He wasn't stubborn about, this is my canvas and I'm holding ground, because that's what will get you knocked out against Romero, standing your ground and trying to fight force with force. I think as soon as Adesanya feels like there's a flurry coming, he's just going to clear out the way. He'll back up, he'll circle away, and then he'll slowly work his way into the center, because he knows that nitrous tank that Romero's got his finger on the button all the time. He can only press that button so many times. And the more times he sprints forward and misses, the easier it's going to be for Adesanya to pick him off. And I think with the Whittaker fight, it's a good example. It only took him 2 rounds, not even. He gave him space in the first round, backed up, moved away, allowed him to get those flurries out of his system, but also paid attention to the directions he was going and his choice of weapons. Then, as the fight started to progress, at the end of the first round, he thought, I'm going to stay in the pocket a little bit here, and dropped him clean. Then the second round came about, and it was the same situation again. He was cashing in with the right hook as he was slipping out, and hurt him clean with the right hook. And then the finish was a right hook, left hook. And that is him giving just enough space to be out of danger, but be able to stay in range to land his own shots. And, like I said, he even took a shot in that fight to land, and he was annoyed about that. I think he wants to be even cleaner with Yoel Romero, which means he's going to give a bit more time. If he sees Yoel Romero moving, he'll just get out of the way. Avoid that fire.
I mean, it looks like the story for a long time with Israel and his entire UFC run has always been that, the next guy is the guy to beat him, or that he has the style that will give Israel the most problems. If Israel goes in there and beats Yoel Romero, do you think that narrative goes away? Do you think he'll start to become the favorite in his future fights? And do you think that Yoel Romero, where would you rank him as one of the toughest challenges for Israel when it comes to the middleweight division in his title run?
Honestly, I think Yoel Romero's top 3 of challengers for any middleweight in the world. I think with the danger and the threat that he brings, with the power and the speed that he moves at. I mean, we know he's got wrestling credentials, but we don't really see them. But the knockout power that he's got is a serious thing. And one of the reasons why he's so effective is because he's not really fundamentally very sound. He's quite chaotic. Things come at weird angles. I think we've seen a refinement in the last few years. I mean, the double jab cross against Rockhold was a thing of beauty, but it's very rare we see him set up a power shot with a double jab. I think he's a very, very serious threat, and I have a lot of respect for Adesanya for taking this fight. I think he realised that it will silence a lot of critics if he wins, but at the same time, you're always going to get those people that you look at someone that makes things look very easy, and you think, that person can beat them. I think Conor's experienced the same thing. I think every lightweight, featherweight, and welterweight in the world has put their hand up at some point and said, I think I've got the tools to beat Conor. And I think it's a different thing when you get in there. And I think Adesanya's the same. There was a point where everyone thought, this is the right person to beat Anderson Silva. And it got to the stage where every time he was stepping into the octagon, it was just like, there's not even any point in this title defense because he's going to make it look too easy. And I think Adesanya is probably 2-3 fights away from that status, but he's on his way.
Yeah, it'd be crazy for him to reach that status, so early in his career, especially considering how many fights he's had in such a short amount of time. I know Adesanya doesn't really want to talk about this at this point, but this Jon Jones fight seems like it may happen, if and when Adesanya can get past a few more title challenges. I'm just wondering, Dan, how interested personally are you in that fight actually happening? And would you give Adesanya a chance? And did Jon Jones' performance against Dominic Reyes change how you think that fight might look?
Yes, it did a lot. It's and Adesanya actually talked about this on stage in Auckland. I think he felt like Jon Jones kind of showed a slowing of his game in that fight. I don't necessarily think that's the right phrasing for it. I don't think Jon Jones is slowing down necessarily. But I certainly feel like he doesn't really identify many challenges in his division. And I'm not sure whether it's challenging him enough to keep raising his game like he was in his early years. I think maybe Adesanya stepping up as a real challenge, a real threat would kind of, what was it that Jon Jones kept saying, which was really weird, tickle his pickle or something? I think
yeah.
I think it might be the right thing to get him really fired up and ready for a fight. But I absolutely give Adesanya a chance in that. If we see the Jon Jones that we've seen in the last couple of fights, that he doesn't seem as confident as he used to be. Doesn't seem as confident in throwing his hands like he used to. I mean, like you think about back to his Rashad Evans fight or his Teixeira fight, where he's just stepping into the breach with elbows and just smashing people up. It takes a confidence to do that, and I think that I think Gustafsson scared the crap out of him a little bit in those first couple of rounds. And it changed his game a bit. He was fortunate to get away with the win in that one. But you remember what happened with Matt Serra and GSP. That changed GSP's approach to things. And I do think that this has changed Jon Jones' approach a little bit. I think, you look at the Santos fight. I feel like he could have stopped Santos, especially with that knee injury. I feel like he could have probably got Anthony Smith out of there. Anthony Smith's incredibly tough. But when there's nothing coming back at you, there's no reason not to put your foot on the gas. So I think he has cruised a little bit. And I think if he tries to cruise against Adesanya, there's a lot of holes in his game that Adesanya could exploit with feints and head movements. And the reality is, by the time Adesanya gets to that stage, if he beats Romero and maybe somebody else afterwards, we're going to be thinking about him as a much more serious threat to anybody that he fights, including Stipe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you about that, Dan. Eugene Behrman on the program speaking about the fact that he wants to hop over Jon Jones and go up to heavyweight and fight a guy like Stipe. Israel's always done that throughout his career in kickboxing, go up weight classes. It's what they believe in at City Kickboxing, defeating the division and then moving up to greater challenges. So from your perspective, when you hear Coach Eugene Behrman talk about a potential Stipe Israel Adesanya fight, and a lot of people are very critical about this, is this something that sounds realistic to you? Israel going in there and dethroning, one of the most successful sort of UFC heavyweights in quite some time?
I think there's a bit of mind games being played, if I'm honest. I think that Adesanya would absolutely take that fight, and he would like that challenge at some point in his future. But as of right now, there's no point in stepping up to fight Stipe. The middleweight division's still got a few guys in it they can fight, and I think it was kind of a poke at Jon Jones, like, well, you keep talking about going up and fighting Stipe. And Jones is a legit heavyweight when he decides to be. When he steps up to heavyweight, he's going to be bigger than most guys in there anyway. Whereas Adesanya, it's more of a challenge because he's not as big as Jon Jones. He's certainly not as big as Stipe. So I think that he's a bit of teasing of Jon Jones. I think they're maybe trying to smoke him out, see if he actually will go up to heavyweight. And the benefit goes two ways. I mean, if he steps up to heavyweight, that's going to add muscle onto the frame of Jon Jones, which will slow him down, which suits Adesanya, even if he comes back down to light heavyweight. It also sees how he does at heavyweight in comparison to Stipe, who's, Jon Jones has not got too dissimilar style to Adesanya in a lot of ways, the way that he fights, he uses range. So I think that there's lessons to be learned if he does step up and fight Stipe. And it also opens up the light heavyweight division. If he convinces Jones to step up and fight Stipe, that light heavyweight belt is up for grabs. And that is an absolute surefire way of getting Jon Jones into a fight if he steps in and takes the vacant belt off whoever is at the top of the tree at the time.
Probably Yoel Romero moving up weight classes and becoming champion there. Jon Jones moves up and then a rematch. Just quickly, though, with that Jon Jones match, and we want to quickly get your thoughts on who you think is going to win between Romero and Adesanya in just a second. But just with that Jon Jones fight, we've seen Jon Jones want to beat his opponents in the area where they're best at. And obviously, Israel is a remarkable striker, an absolute expert and specialist, not saying that he hasn't grown his grappling game and his wrestling game and his submission game in the meantime, but that is the sort of area where he excels at. Do you see a Jon Jones that tries to outstrike Israel just to set a point like he has previously with guys like Santos? Or do you see a Jon Jones that realizes that Israel is a real threat and sort of uses more wrestling in more areas that he believes he's stronger in, grappling-wise, in order to win that fight?
Yeah, I think the thing with Jon Jones is that he always knows that he's got the opportunity to grapple. If he decides, he'll probably decide he wants to strike and trade because he's got a huge reach advantage still over Adesanya. He's got a lot of damaging tools and weapons that Adesanya's not faced before. I mean, that oblique kick, I expect we're going to see it a little bit from Romero. But the way that Jones and Romero throw that kick are very different. Like, Romero leaps in, there's an opportunity to get out of the way of that. Jon Jones just smashes that lead leg from where he's standing. And the range of Jon Jones is a real challenge for Adesanya because he utilizes his range so well against other people. He'd have to kind of almost reverse engineer other people's approach to him. He has to then be the problem for the taller guy. Jon Jones having the wrestling to fall back upon, I think, is a confidence builder and a safety net for Jon Jones. But what we learned from the Reyes fight is that if the takedown doesn't happen, it actually makes him more vulnerable on the feet. And that's not a vulnerability that you want to feel. If you feel like you're losing the strike in exchange, you shoot a takedown and you either get it and the guy gets straight back to his feet, or you get denied entirely, then then you literally know you're okay. Now I've got to strike with this guy that's already beaten me. So I don't know. I think there's a hard-headedness to Jon Jones that will try and force himself to win the striking match. And I think if we do see him wrestle, I think it's because he feels like he's getting bettered. The other thing as well is I don't think Jon Jones would want anyone to go, oh, well, of course you out-wrestled him because you're bigger, stronger. That would kind of rob him of that victory. Knocking him out clean at range with one punch would be, that would be beating Adesanya at his game. And I think that's really what Jon Jones would want to do if the opportunity ever arose.
Oh man, hearing you talk about this fight, Dan, makes me wish that it was a lot sooner than later. But just going back to obviously Romero and Adesanya, who are you leaning towards in this one? I think you said before that you expect Adesanya to kind of pick him apart a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's Adesanya's fight to lose. That doesn't at all diminish the threat of Yoel Romero. There's always that intangible, that massive shot, that flying knee, that whatever it is. Or that oblique kick that tears his knee apart. There are lots and lots of things that Romero can do in a split second. Even if he's lost the other 24 minutes of the fight, he can always change that around. I think the odds are stacked in Adesanya's favor because he's the technician. He's a better technical fighter than Yoel Romero. Doesn't necessarily have the explosive capabilities, but has got the endurance and enough strength to make those shots count over the time. I feel like it's Adesanya's fight to lose, but the threat of losing is a very real one.
Absolutely, Dan, and we do appreciate your time. I know we said it'd be a quick one, but your insight has just made us have so many questions, and we apologize because we know it's late over there in London. So we'll let you go in just a couple more questions. Just very, very quickly, Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk is going to be a fight that's going to be in the co-main event. Weili just absolutely impressed everybody with her title win over Jessica Andrade back in August. Obviously, Joanna, unbelievable legacy as a champion, someone that's incredibly technical, someone with a whole lot of experience in that octagon, has been in absolute wars going all the way through to the 5th round. What are you expecting from this fight? And do you think Weili is going to be able to overcome someone like Joanna, who's accomplished so much in the UFC and is someone who's so experienced going into this fight?
I think Weili's got a very, very good chance. Joanna's a fantastic fighter. She's very, very good. She knows what she's good at. She gravitates her entire game to it. She's a good Thai boxer. She's got great takedown defense, and she punishes you when you shoot. What we've seen from Joanna though is like it's volume striking. It's wearing people down with a barrage, exhausting people. Think back to the Jessica Penne fight. I was octagon side for that one, and it got to the stage where you just like there's just nothing coming back. But there was never one of those big bang shots where you just see her drop. And that's, I think, the difference with Zhang Weili. Nobody else has done what she did to Jessica Andrade, because Jessica Andrade is the pile driver. That's what her nickname translates. Yeah. So, like, she's the one that's the wrecking ball in there. She's normally the one that's smashing these strawweights to pieces. I think she met her match in Zhang Weili, and someone that's got the same kind of force and power and capability in a physical presence, but also in a technical presence as well. And I think that even if she's at a slight technical deficit in comparison to Joanna, the impact of her shots could make the big difference. I think this is a very tough fight for Joanna because she's got to win the marathon. And I think Zhang Weili can cause her problems all the way through the fight. And the other thing as well, I'm really enjoying following Zhang Weili on Instagram and watching the way that she's training. There's something very kind of old school about it. She's doing a lot of stuff like where she's up on her toes, holding kettlebells and stuff. It's a lot of the stuff that Shaolin monks used to do. And I don't know whether that's where she's generating the power from. There's a stability in her style which will carry her through a lot of things. I'm excited to see what she can do. I don't want to jump the gun, but I want to see her fight Shevchenko as well, because I think if she gets past Joanna, that's the next logical matchup.
Wow, that'd be a fascinating matchup. I was curious, do you think we're going to see Weili Zhang at 100%? Because she's been dealing with, moving her training camps due to the coronavirus, visa battles, all these kinds of things. As a fighter yourself, Dan, you understand the mental pressures and all the distractions that come with fighting. It's not just showing up. Do you think we're going to get a 100% Weili Zhang in this fight?
Honestly, I do. Yeah, I mean, like I said, following her on Instagram, it looks like she's got her training on lockdown. It looks like she's got a team of people around her that are looking after her and that are guiding her very well. From what I understand, she was out of China really before there was much concern to be out of China. I understand that she's been in Thailand training. Now she's in Vegas already. So I think she's handled it perfectly. And I'll be honest, what we saw from the Chinese fighters in Auckland, two fighters that come to mind that had to move their training camps to Thailand, Song Kenan and Yan Xiaonan. They both had to get out of China pretty quickly. And I mean, Song Kenan was within a day of having to get out of China before he wouldn't be allowed into New Zealand. So he kept it real tight. He won by a spectacular knockout, really crisp. And Yan Xiaonan is another wrecking ball in this division. We've got to keep an eye on her as well. She looked great. So I don't think training in China is particularly easy anyway. I think no matter where they train and what they do, it's a difficult and arduous process. I've trained over there myself, and the facilities are not great. And I think that anytime they step outside of that, go to Thailand or go to the US or whatever, I think it might be quite a refreshing feeling to see what the rest of the world looks like and is doing. And I can only imagine martial artists like Zhang Weili will take that in their stride.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dan Hardy, you have gotten us excited for UFC 248 this weekend. Final question, we promise, before we let you go, and that is just a fun one that a lot of the fans have been talking about last week, so we just want to quickly gauge your thoughts on this. It's outside of UFC 248, but it's a dream matchup that everybody's been talking about, so we just want to let you go on this. Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje right now. It doesn't look like it's going to be happening. It's right now in preliminary talks, and it doesn't look like the UFC are going to put it together. It does look like Khabib might get that rematch with Conor McGregor. But let's say the gods line up, everything lines up perfectly, and we get this massive, massive clash between these two titans. Who do you think, if you're looking at this right now, Conor McGregor, incredible power, look, fantastic UFC 246, looks like he's back mentally, physically, back to training, just looks like he's maybe the Conor McGregor that we saw around UFC 205, and Justin Gaethje, who's improved so much from, his PFL days, is in there, sort of absolute killer, has some defense now, but also brings that action when it comes to striking, also unbelievable grappling, he doesn't really use it. When you look at this matchup right now, how does that sort of come together in your mind? A fight genius like yourself, who do you think sort of comes out on top when you look at these two guys matching up? It's an unbelievable matchup.
It is. It is. So you've got Conor coming back down to 155, which is where the fight's most likely to be. He looked great at welterweight. I wonder how that transfers back down to 155, because I do feel like he put muscle mass on. Shoulders and triceps were a lot bigger. So there's a question how that weight cut goes and how that reacts if Gaethje tries to wrestle him. We go back to the Chad Mendes fight, and someone with a full training camp and a skill set of Chad Mendes might have had more of an impact on Conor on that night, because he had a damn good go and he was stepping in on short notice. You've got to think Justin Gaethje is a decent bit bigger than Chad Mendes. He's got that wrestling offensive if he needs it, and he can hustle for 25 minutes if he needs it. But he also maintains that power to late in the rounds. So there are a lot of ways that Justin Gaethje can be a problem for Conor, especially if Conor struggles back down to 55 and he's not the same fighter that he was against Cowboy. On the other hand, this is a fight where Conor can basically tee off on someone that puts his face in the fire. And Conor's got the knockout power to put anybody in this division down, at welterweight as well, I would say, if he lands clean. So there's a risk of Justin Gaethje just getting lit up from a distance and being too hard-headed to change his tact. But he has always got that second option of forcing Conor up against the fence and forcing him to deal with his wrestling. And that's where the question comes in of, has Conor improved in his takedown defense since we've seen him in previous fights, which I'm sure he has. And then the big question is, what does he look like at 155? Because, even though he was a 45er, he looked like Skeletor at 45. He looked healthy at 55. He looked big at 170. Going back down to 155, I think he might look and feel different. And that can be teased out of him with a heavy wrestling offensive. So I'm going to sit right on the fence and say, take my money, please. I want to watch that fight.
Good. All right. Well, if Dan Hardy's on board, that means hopefully this fight gets made and comes together. Guys, follow them out on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Hardy MMA. I know you're filming Inside the Octagon tomorrow with good friend of the program, John Gooden, and we can't wait to see what you guys put together for this UFC 248 preview, and also Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards. The man has so much content, it's insane. Follow his channel, Full Reptile. Also, the guys at Full Reptile, the crew back that do a lot of the work and the event coverage, are great guys as well. There's the War Room, there's Listen with Mark Goddard, there's his excellent work on BT Sport, also his book, Full Reptile. Dan, absolute honor having you on. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Always good talking to you. Enjoy the fights.